you. I'm going to do it. And then after we get done with that one, I'm going to have you do number 5. And then I'll come back to number 4B. All right? What's different about 4A compared to the other two? Anna? Opens down. How'd you know that? Negative in front of the x squared. So already in A, there's something a little bit different. I'm going to put next to it, just so I have in my head that this thing is opening down. That helps me remember. What else is different about 4A besides opening down? Joe?
Well, it has a value greater than 1.
It has a value other than 1, which is greater. It's a 2, not a 1. So that's going to cause us to do something else. Our process still starts the same. So let's try it still. This one, instead of being what we see there, we're going to rewrite to start with as h of x equals, and I said, let's put all the stuff that has x's inside of the parentheses. So that's negative 2x squared plus 4x, leave a big space, and then minus 6. Bless you. Now, since there's a number in front of the x that's not a 1, like the other ones have had, we have to pull that out of the parentheses. When you complete the square, you're never allowed to have anything in front of the x other than a 1, which we don't write down. So I'm going to factor out the negative 2. Here's what happens next. I have negative 2 times, parentheses, x squared minus 2x, parentheses, minus 6. When I'm completing the square, I look at the negative 2 and I go, oh, negative 2 from inside the parentheses, divided by 2, because it's always divided by 2, and square it. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. Remember, we have to balance, though. So because I added 1 here, I need to add 2 here.
No. Nope.
You would have thought that plus 2 in gray should have been a minus 1, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. Why is it not? I didn't really add 1. I really subtracted off 2 because the negative 2 on the outside of the parentheses is affecting the 1 on the inside. So really the way I've changed this equation is not added 1, I've really added negative 2. So to undo that, that's why in gray on the outside I'm adding 2. So when I multiply by the negative 2 on the outside, be careful, it affects the stuff on the inside. That's important to know. Write yourself a note. I'm now going to rewrite my equation. My h of x is going to have a negative 2 on the outside. There's going to be a parentheses that's being squared, and on the outside of the parentheses, the negative 6 and the positive 2 become negative 4. So some things that have happened. This stuff turns out to be negative 4, of course. And whatever I see inside here now becomes this whole squared parentheses deal. In order to find that, I look at the x squared inside the parentheses, and I take its square root. And you should always, 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 always see x first inside the parentheses. Always. I look at the last number. It's a 1. I take the square root of 1 and I get 1. And then I look inside the parentheses and I go, do I see any negative signs in there? Yes. So you put a negative sign inside. The reason we're doing this is we want to answer some questions. First question was, what is the vertex? So to find the vertex, I look inside the parentheses and see what makes it 0, and the answer is 1. That's my x value. I look on the outside and I just write down the number, -4. Which way is this thing opening? We already said earlier, it's opening down because of the negative in front of the parentheses.
Really?
Zero minus 3 is 4. No.
So the first thing I do is I write down all the x stuff in one parentheses, and everything else on the outside.
Wait, so this goes up?
Then second, I factor out whatever is in front of the x squared. You ever notice how some people are born clueless and other people it takes 15 years to get there?
Oh, well, do you x?
Yes.
I got x minus 3 equals 0. What else do you do?
Joe, sit down. Thank you. So I factored out. How many people got this far? Awesome. Then I look at the number in front of the x, which is -6. What do I do with that -6?
Divide by 2.
Divide by 2 to start with. So I divide by 2, -6, divided by 2, and I square it. And I get 9. So far, so good. Then I have to rewrite this thing. I have to rewrite it in its standard form. When I do that, I have f of x equals -4 parentheses squared. Oh no, I forgot to do something. I forgot to balance. So if I added 9 here, I've got to add 36. Because remember, this -4 is affecting the 9. And that's actually subtracting off 36. So now down below, that -12 and +36 turn into 24. And then I look up into my red equation, and I take the square root of x squared. And in fact, you always know the first thing in the parentheses is x. You don't even have to think about that. The last number is a 9. Square root of 9, 3. And are there any minuses inside? Yes, so you put a minus inside. And then they ask us some very pointed questions. The first thing that they ask about is they ask about the vertex. So the vertex is whatever makes parentheses 0, 3, and the number on the outside, which is 24. This is the vertex, 324. The second thing they ask for is an intercept, but instead of doing that, I'm going to do the axis of symmetry because I think that's easier. We know that this parabola is opening down, so I'm just going to put that off to the side here so I don't forget. Which means that my axis of symmetry has to go right through that thing. So here's my axis of symmetry. I know that's going to be an x equals thing. So my axis of symmetry is x equals something. Oh, look in the vertex. What's the x equal? 3. On your test that you take in this chapter, if it says what's the axis of symmetry and you don't write down x equals 3, and you just write down 3, I'm going to put down y equals and mark it wrong. Because I get a pick. And I'm mean. So now I know my vertex is at 324. 324, it's somewhere over here. This thing is opening down. The sketch sucks, it's horrible. And I need to find some things. Oh man, it looks like, first of all, that I am crossing the y-axis somewhere. That's called a y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, which I think is the easier of the intercepts to find, you just plug a 0 in for the x value. So I plug a 0 in here for x in the pink equation. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. 9 times negative 4, negative 36. Negative 36 and 24 is negative 12. Dang, does that graph suck. This is at 0, negative 12. Ha! The picture is ridiculous. Now the other thing I need to find are my x-intercepts. Now my x-intercepts are a little bit more challenging than my y because this is where the y value is 0. So what I'm looking for, oh look, there's probably 2 of them, right? Because it's opening down. So for my x-intercepts, what I need to do is I need to find both of them. There are 2. And I'm going to have a 0 in for the y value because that's what an intercept is. Has a 0 somewhere. And if it's the x-intercept, the y value is 0. What that means is as I look at my pink equation, I see this. 0 equals negative 4 x minus 3 squared plus 24. Now, one way that you could do this is you could shove this into y1, this into y2, second trace 5, enter, enter, arrow, enter. We've done that in this class before. So if you're using your calculator, this is a great way to save some time and do it. If you're using your calculator. But since I know that most people can do that, what I'm going to talk about is what would I do if I'm not using my calculator? So I would put my calculators down. That's just me, of course. You don't have to. And I would talk about, instead, what happens when I can't use my calculator? So here's what I do. I solve this equation. I move the 24 to the left-hand side. When I move the 24 to the left-hand side, it becomes negative 24. And then I have that's equal to negative 4 parentheses x minus 3 squared. Oh no! There's a negative 4 in front of the parentheses. Let's get rid of it. So I divide by negative 4. 24, that's negative, divided by negative 4 is positive 6. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 is positive 1. Darn it, I'm trying to get to the x values. How do I get rid of that square? Square root. So I square root that stuff. I square root the right-hand side, and I get x minus 3. I square root the left-hand side, and I get the square root of 6. Uh-oh, I square rooted a variable. Plus or minus. And then, the only thing left is to move the 3, bless you, to the other side. So then I get x equals 3, which will now be positive, plus or minus the square root of 6. So as I write my x-intercepts, one way that I could write them, instead of what I had up here with 2 parentheses, since there are 2 answers, I could have written 3 plus or minus square root of 6, comma, 0. That is representing 2 x-intercepts. 3 plus the square root of 6, comma, 0, and 3 minus the square root of 6, comma, 0. Now this is the way I think most people would not be able to do right off the top of their heads. So in addition to this, I'm also going to show you how to do the calculator method. Now grab your calculator. In y1, put down 0. In y2, put down the other side of the equation. So I'm in y equals